seat. We're going to get started now. Good afternoon, and on behalf of Murphy Brothers Contracting, thank you all for joining us for today's presentation, Killing COVID with High Energy Light and Air, Making Buildings Safe Again Where We Live, Work, and Play. We're delighted to be bringing you this timely presentation from the official Earthkind Energy Zoom platform. Earthkind Energy, saving your clients money while reducing their carbon footprint since 1999. This presentation is brought to you by Murphy Brothers Contracting, known throughout the greater Westchester, Lower Hudson Valley, and Southern Fairfield region for award-winning construction projects. And for more information on how easy it is to work with the Murphy Brothers team, just visit our website at murphybrothers.com. Our thanks to the following sponsors: Dakin HVAC Systems, Atlantic Westchester, Global Plasma Solutions, the Center for Sustainable Development, Westchester Home Magazine, and of course, Earthkind Energy Consultants. Couple things. First of all, there is no AIA credit or attendance certificate available for today's presentation. So if you're here for the credit or a certificate, we can't help you. However, if you're here looking for solid information and entertaining time, you're in the right place. So don't touch that dial. We're about to start soon. Now you're all on mute, so if you have any questions for either of the co-presenters, that means there's two people presenting today, write them in the chat box and we'll try to stump both speakers after the presentation, so stick around for the fun. Our co-presenters, you try saying it, today, know their topics pretty well. Ron Kamen is the founder and CEO of Earthkind Energy Consulting, a New York State consulting firm that has been representing commercial clients in clean energy transformations that save money and reduce carbon footprints since 1999. Ron's clients have included the World Bank, U.S. military, small businesses, and Fortune 1000 corporations, schools, colleges, municipalities, and government agencies and authorities, plus Murphy Brothers Contracting. Ron's Clean Energy Consulting has produced improvements that eliminate megatons of carbon, improve air quality, and annually save his clients hundreds of millions of dollars. Our second presenter, Charlie Waddell, is the Chief Technology Officer and founder of Global Plasma Solutions, Inc., a manufacturer of NeedlePoint BiPolar Ionization, products for the indoor air purification market, and the first technology tested against COVID-19 and confirmed to inactivate 99.99% within 30 minutes. His experience includes designing HVAC systems for residential, commercial, and industrial markets, as well as for the automotive, hand dryer, and aviation industries. Just a reminder to enter your questions in the chat box for our Q&A at the end of the session. Gentlemen, please take it away.
And thank you, Mr. Murphy. Just had one question come up. So this will be recorded, but we're not sure if it'll be available. So just FYI, but we will be answering anybody's questions and definitely sharing all the information. So just drop us a note afterwards, or drop Mr. Murphy a note if you'd be so kind, and we'll make sure to take care of you. Okay, so here we go, guys. We're going to do a short piece. So thank you, Michael. Thank you, Murphy Brothers. Thank you, all the other co-sponsors for this event. And first, just to set the tone right, if you would, please, in memory of those who have taken their last breath in 2020, please take yourself a deep breath and hold it for 20 seconds of silence. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. A lot of us have lost some tremendous people this past year. Obviously, it all reflects back on our own mortality. And one of the reasons we're doing this today is so that we can take as many precautions as possible to make sure that we and all the people we care about are safeguarded through these times and all future times. Okay, real quick. So today we're focusing in on the role of HVAC systems in airborne infection and transmission. And pretty much if you take a look at the bioaerosols, what happens is that we have these aerosols, these particles, larger droplets fall to the ground, smaller droplets evaporate, become nuclei. Aerosols, these small pieces, will remain suspended in the air for hours or even days. They can travel long distances and recirculate within the building envelope. 3,000 droplets of nuclei are created by talking for 5 minutes, singing for 1 minute, or one cough. And when we sneeze, that generates tens of thousands of droplets of nuclei, and that could spread to individuals from at a speed of 100 meters per second. If you would be so kind, Zoom is not letting us automatically mute everybody, so if you would just mute yourself when you come online, if you'd be so kind. Thank you, everybody. Okay. So COVID's colds and the flu. And if you take a look, basically COVID over here, I guess you can see my mouse, right? There we go. Thank you very much. COVID, nobody knows exactly how long the immunization will last at this point. COVID is in a family of coronaviruses. Some of those other coronaviruses are SARS, which is severe acute respiratory syndrome, or MERS, which is Middle East respiratory syndrome. And those, when you do get them, you do have some immunity for some period of time. There's also in that same class of family are common colds. So again, these particulates are there, and there's a whole bunch of family members there, including influenza. All right. So currently, how do you disinfect your building is one of the questions. And if you would, real quickly, tap into the chat box, if you would, whether you use disinfectants, whether you use UV lighting, whether you use some form of ionization. Disinfectants, UV lighting, ionization. If you would be so kind, people. Disinfectants, ionization, disinfectants, not really, not much. So here we go. There are, in terms of disinfectants, we're just covering this really quickly. You can go to the US EPA and take a look at the different types of disinfectant products that are out there and find that there's a step-by-step process where there are approved disinfectants that are available for everybody. And if you take a look actually at this site under the EPA, it lists those list-N disinfectants for use against SARS in particular, and there's a whole list of those that are available. And if you're not currently using some that are on the list, you might want to take a look at that list because they're both effective and also non-toxic. When we take a look at some other means of dealing with issues, what we find is that UVC lighting. So there's UVA lighting, UVB lighting, those both go through the atmosphere, but UVC lighting is the type that is very effective against wiping out all sorts of bacteria and other forms of pathogens. And the Illuminating Engineering Society was one of the first to come out and identify that SARS can be knocked out with UVC. At the proper dosage, it basically knocks out the virus and kills it off. ASHRAE, also the function that's there, ASHRAE has come out and released 2 positions that basically say that UVC lighting is very effective as long as the light intensity is right, the length of exposure is right, lamp placement is right, and you'll have to keep an eye on the life of the lamp to make sure that it doesn't deteriorate too fast over time for what you're trying to accomplish. But UVC lighting is a very effective means of knocking out pathogens. It's been around for a long time. It's used a lot in hospitals. And one of the ways that it's used is when somebody coughs or anything else, it goes into your HVAC system, and between the air filters and UVC, you can knock out the virus, right? As long as it goes into your HVAC system. So one of the pieces that ASHRAE has come up with is that air cleaning can help mitigate the disease transmission in room devices, within room devices, or within your HVAC systems. And there's various mechanical, electronic, UVC systems, and other emerging technologies. So in upper air transmission, what happens is that you put fixtures at a height of 7 feet or more that knocks down anything that's going up into that space. You want to basically keep that happening when, whoops, 1 second here. I'm just going to see where we have some folks coming in. Thank you very much. We've got that person. There we go. Okay, so 7 feet or higher. Use this primarily when there's no mechanical ventilation in the area, or when you have high risk areas. And one of the pieces with this is that you need low UV reflectivity off the walls and the ceilings, because otherwise the UV light bounces around, and that UVC light is not good for long-term exposure for humans or other living things. Okay, so upper air fixtures look like this. They go up. There's a high intensity spread that goes about. If you mix the air properly, then that starts to knock down the virus with UVC technology. These fixtures are up on the sconces, they're up on the walls, but again, they're specifically focused on higher areas in a room. And sometimes you can even put these fixtures in a room and have them automatically come on at night or come on when nobody's in that room. So then it flashes UV light, wipes out viruses wherever it is or wherever it bounces. And there's a whole host of technologies, a whole host of different fixtures that are available there. And then in addition to those fixtures that you can put in there, there's also portable UVC devices that you can roll into your room. And by rolling those devices into a room, if you do the proper calculations, turning on those devices when no one's in the room, when it's unoccupied, you can then knock out the virus within those rooms. Very effective technology, but you have to bring it into every room. You have to have it there for a sustained period of time, and you have to make sure on all the surfaces that don't get direct exposure that the light bouncing and reflecting will have enough UVC in it for a long enough time to be able to knock out the virus and other pathogens. There's also external solutions and other portable solutions where you can have the air that circulates, you roll those into a space, and that knocks out various different technologies, various different forms of pathogen. Those technologies are also very effective. But one of the next steps then, as we started to discuss, are the benefits of putting the UV light or other technologies inside your HVAC. And in this particular case, when you take a look, and ASHRAE says that banks of UV lights installed inside a system generally focus on the coils, on the pans, and other wetted surfaces. And that means that your irradiance in that area can be a little bit less depending upon, again, exposure time and how fast that air is moving. And it's set up off of the face of the coil. So in this case, what we have is like in the coil, you have before the coil filters. And one of the things we all have to make sure of is that those filters are very clean and well maintained, because otherwise dirt gets through. And when the dirt does get through, what happens is there's already moisture on those coils. So in this case, the dirt mixes with the coils, and that combination causes a mud to stick to the fins of the coil. And what happens with that mud is that you then get a whole host of things growing on those coils, very nasty things growing on those coils, which are not good for humans or any other living thing. When you take a look at these issues, in addition to having these really nasty substances growing on the coils, it also creates an insulation, meaning that you have to have colder temperatures to achieve the same air temperature. It blocks the air spaces in the coil, requiring more energy to drive the fan and get the same airflow going. It blocks the drains, which causes maintenance issues. And then in addition, it has extensive amounts of cost associated with both the labor and the management of that labor to make sure that it's maintained. How much does that fin fouling cost you? A fouling thickness of only 0.006 inches has a 5% efficiency loss. When you start going up and you start getting thicker pieces, less than an inch, what you find is that you get dramatic decreases in your efficiency, which means dramatic decreases in the amount of ventilation that's going through. And so that's not a good thing for all the reasons, including energy costs and dollars. But the good news is that when you do install these technologies, whether it's UVC or we're going to hear in a moment about ionization technologies, it knocks down bacteria and viruses dramatically. So you go from 1.7 parts per million down to 33 per centimeter squared. And same thing happens as hospitals have reported in various other locations. How you size this, though, is really critical. So what you want to look at if you're putting any of these technologies into your system is what's the duct width, what's the duct length, what's the height of the ducts, and what's the airflow. And all those calculations have to be done properly so that you have the right design, so that you maximize the amount of red kill zones so that you take out the pathogens that are in those zones. And those designs can be a little bit extensive, right? So there should be, if you're doing these types of technologies with a UV technology, you want to make sure that somebody knows what they're doing all those calculations, and they're putting in the right number of tubes. Sometimes it could just be one UVC tube that goes across your coil. Sometimes you may need one from either side because of the length and the width, of the coil. Other times you may need some two coming from both sides of it, or even three, or various different technologies, different setups to be able to make it work for your system. In addition, last but not least, is each technology, each HVAC system is a little bit different, so there's all different types. You have to make sure the technology is designed for your particular type. But the good news is there's all different options available, whether you have a central heat HVAC system or a mini split system or any other type of various pieces of HVAC technology. Another piece to make sure of is that you have monitoring going on with either wired or wireless monitors that make sure that not only is the system turned on, but that that lamp is working. So you need to take a close look at the monitoring and make sure that you're getting the type of information that gives you the certainty that this system is actually doing what you want it to do and what you expect it to do. So the pros and cons of UVC are inside space only for upper air or when unoccupied. When it's inside your HVAC system with filters, there's a good kill ratio as long as the light intensity is right, the lamp placement is right, the length of exposure is calculated properly, and the lamp life is on the right cycle, that you're not waiting too long to change those lamps. The cons: not all pathogens go into your HVAC system, right? So if it's not being sucked in, not all the pathogens go in there. It does not affect surfaces. To effectively kill pathogens on the surface, that means that you have to bring UV light into that location, shine it around for a long enough time to make sure that you're killing everything on the surface. So you need to kind of have a combination of both. If you go with UVC, make sure it's in your HVAC system. Also make sure that you get the exposure on the surfaces. There's challenges to designing it properly, and then in addition you have to maintain this system, which means that you have to calculate in the cost of the lamps and the labor to change those lamps, and also make sure you have the proper monitoring that those lamps are working. One of the great technologies that has come out, that's actually been around for a long time now, has over 250,000 installations, primarily from cleaning the coil and from an energy saving perspective, but now has been identified, in addition to those two great benefits, which were always there, plus pathogen benefits, it's been identified now about the impacts on COVID-19. So this is NeedlePoint BiPolar Ionization. Many people are familiar with ionization, but there's levels of it, and we're lucky today to have one of the foremost experts on needlepoint bipolar ionization with over 30 different patents. I first heard about this technology, for those of you that are in Westchester, from Atlantic Westchester, who is promoting this technology. Bud Hammer and Kathy Hoffman have this technology in their office. Bud has it in his house. Not only is he a firm believer of it, but he's out there installing these across the board because they've been proven very, very effective. And to give you a sense of ions, what are ions and where are they and how does this all work? And when you take a look at clean outdoor air, that nice smell, that fresh sense, that's 1,000 to 1,200, in that range of parts per cubic centimeter. When you go into other areas, Charlie will talk about how those ions increase. But once you're into a polluted area, whether semi-polluted air or densely polluted urban air, the concentrations and go down dramatically. And anytime you have conditioned air, even in a rural area, you're going from 1,000 to 1,200 down to about 100 parts, which means that we have dramatic less ions around us. And one of the great pieces of this technology now is that we can have these ions returned with bipolar, needlepoint bipolar or ionization. And with that, I'm going to introduce it to the guy who's got 30 different patents. Charlie, if you'd be so kind.
All right, Ron, thanks for the introduction, as well as Michael for having me on here and presenting today. Let me get my presentation teed up here. So as Ron said, I'm Charlie Waddell, the founder and the CTO of Global Plasma Solutions. For most of you on this call that are from the Northeast, you probably recognize I'm not from there just by hearing my first few words here. I live in Roanoke, Virginia, up in the mountains. I used to say at least on the weekends, but now because of COVID, I'm here, it seems like every day, unfortunately for my wife. So with that, I'll kick off the presentation. And now I'm going to talk about NeedlePoint BiPolar Ionization and how you can actually upgrade existing HVAC systems or design new systems using this technology in order to control COVID-19 as well as other contaminants within the space. As Ron already mentioned, these ions are already occurring outdoors. If you go high in altitude or if you go to a waterfall and you actually measure the ion counts, as you can see here, this is from the Rhine Falls in Switzerland. Before I even got close to the falls, I was already at 2,000 to 3,000 ions per cc. And as I got closer, it went over to 20,000 ions per cubic centimeter. So these ions are already out there naturally occurring. But unfortunately, inside of our buildings, the particle filters designed to take the particles out of the air actually take the ions out of the air as well. So in order for you to increase the ion levels in your space, you mount these systems after your filters. It does not matter if the filter is a MERV 8 or a HEPA filter. It has to be after the filter in order for these ions to get downstream. Now, if you happen to mount this product before the filter, you will still get some benefit, but nothing downstream of that filter. So you'll have a highly sanitized filter. The maintenance techs will love you for that, but it's not going to do anything for you downstream, which is what we're trying to achieve with this technology. Now, once these ions are generated from the devices, you have up to 60 seconds for them to do something before they react with themselves, particles, odors, or pathogens in the airstream. They react with a lot of different things, and that's why they have a lifespan of only up to 60 seconds. So that's why it's important to turn these units on, let them run, and keep your airflow flowing within your system. Here I'm going to show you just a short video why treating the space with ionization is so important. This was put together by Holt Architects, and they had their own office space modeled, and they showed one person coughing without a mask. And there's another video I'm not going to show that shows the same thing, but with the mask on, and how that helps to reduce the actual spread. It still spreads, but not quite as bad. So with that, I'll hit play, and hopefully it'll come through.
We modeled a number of scenarios trying to decide how Holt Architects would return to the office. Staff wanted to know if they'd be allowed to remove their masks when seated at their workstations. And for that reason, our first model represents an unmasked person coughing 3 times in about a 10-minute period. You should note that anywhere from light blue to red represents the HID 50, or human infectious dose for COVID-19, and red is 5 times the human infectious dose. Notice that a cloud carrying a dosage 5 times that HID 50 is carried 30 feet across the studio, and a normal infectious dose can travel more than 50 feet indoors. Finally, notice that the cloud of virus never reaches the mechanical system where filters could be effective. The first model gave us absolute clarity when deciding that all of our staff would be required to wear masks at all times unless in a single occupancy space with the door closed. Our next step was to determine under what other terms would we occupy our office, even with a...
So as you can see, it is important to treat the contaminants in the space. And if I were creating a marketing video, I could not have made a better video to show the importance of treating the space. As he said towards the end, none of this virus, based on this particular simulation, which obviously every HVAC system is different, every space is set up different with supply and return locations, but in this particular model, which I've seen 2 more that are very close to this, they show none of the virus getting back into the space, but it is spreading 20, 30, 40, 50 feet through the entire office. So that's why it's important to treat the space, and it doesn't matter what you put into your ductwork because it's not getting there to be treated in the first place. So this NeedlePoint BiPolar Ionization technology, or ionization units, can be mounted in multiple places. A lot of times it's mounted right to your fan inlet in your smaller systems, generally up to 20 tons. Sometimes it's mounted to your cooling coils inside of your larger air handling systems. And also it's mounted on the ductwork. So if you want to treat the space with the maximum levels of ionization, you would mount it on the supply air duct, especially if you're dealing with a VAV system where in the wintertime you're turning the airflow down substantially to maybe only 30% of the max flow that you have in the summertime. Then you may want to look at mounting the systems in the ductwork to keep the velocity up. Velocity is your friend with this technology. You want to get the ions to the space as fast as possible, and the faster the air is moving over the devices themselves, the more ions they can produce because they're not canceling themselves out. As the airflow slows down and starts dropping below 100 feet per minute, then you're going to have some canceling out. And also, if you have it on the cooling coils, the coils will also absorb some of those ions, and so you lose ion efficiency in the cooling coil as well, but at the same time, you are cleaning your coil. So those are some benefits. So as you leave the presentation, the acronym POPE is the easiest way to remember the benefits of NeedlePoint BiPolar Ionization: particles, odors, pathogens, and energy. Now, one thing we're not going to talk about today as far as the energy saving side is with this technology, ASHRAE Standard 62 allows us to reduce the amount of outside air that's required because this technology cleans the air in the building. It controls the contaminants being generated by the people, the furnishings, and the building itself. And therefore, you can recirculate your air because you're removing the contaminants with this type of technology, and you don't need as much outside air. Now, ASHRAE's COVID-19 guidance, one of those items is to increase your ventilation rates in your building right now. And so a lot of people are following that advice. With this technology, you put this in to help fight COVID-19, but then once the pandemic is over, hopefully it's sooner rather than later, you could then reduce your outside air requirements and save energy going forward with this technology. So you're going to spend the money on a technology to fight COVID. You might as well go with the technology that can actually allow you to reduce your outside air and save energy going forward. And the limiting factor to how low you can go with your outside air requirements will be the pressurization of the building. You still have to make up your bathroom exhaust and your kitchen exhaust and things of that nature. This NeedlePoint technology has been installed in over 250,000 installations worldwide. Some of the leading hospitals around the country and around the world actually are using this technology. You'll recognize some of the big names here as far as their logos. I've got to say Virginia Tech's got to be the best university out there. I live 15 minutes from the campus, so I'm a little bit biased there. Also, you got Harvard up there in the Northeast. The airports are great applications. Anywhere you have a high occupancy of people that are gathering, could possibly be spreading the virus, great applications for this technology. From an energy saving standpoint, again, the higher the occupancy, like gyms, auditoriums, classrooms, especially sports arenas, great opportunities to look at energy savings and outside air reduction after this pandemic is over. ASHRAE, as of July 17th of this year, has now listed ionization as an alternate to increasing your MERV filter rating points. And so if you are currently using a MERV 8 filter, ASHRAE says go to MERV 13 or higher, because you are able to stop more virus per pass if the virus can actually get back to the filter, which again, based on those simulations, that did not happen. So now they're stating in this new guidance, air ionization is an alternate to that, because with NeedlePoint ionization combined with your lower efficiency filter like a MERV 8, you get the equivalency of a MERV 13 particle count in the space. So think about that. You don't have fan energy now being consumed, so you save money there. And also the cost of that MERV 13 filter is a lot more than a MERV 8 filter, depending on the manufacturers that you're working with. Also, we have data from the National Research Council of Canada, which is an independent government organization. They tested this technology on an actual hospital and found that MERV 12 filters plus this technology gave them the equivalency of a MERV 16. So if you already have a MERV 13 filter in place and you add this technology, it's only going to enhance what you have. So now you could achieve that MERV 16 or MERV 17 effectiveness, but with the pressure drop of that MERV 13 filter. Here is a short list that shows the difference of adding filters in your system based on your MERV rating and what you can expect that filter to capture as far as the SARS coronavirus. Now, SARS virus is in the coronavirus family, and this was from 2009. This was an EPA tech paper. And you can see that if the virus gets to the filter, a MERV 8 filter will stop 11% of the virus. If you switch that out with a MERV 13, now you would stop 46% of that. But if you look over on the far right, a MERV 8 filter with ionization gives you 84% effectiveness. So you actually get more benefit out of a lower efficiency filter and ionization than going to the MERV 13 filter. And as I mentioned earlier, with a MERV 13 filter and ionization, it just enhances it that much more. So now you're looking at 98.8% effectiveness versus 46%. And so with this technology, it's not the silver bullet. You have to follow all the government guidelines is what we're recommending: ventilation air, proper humidity between 40 and 60%, PPE, face masks. So this is just one of those things to help fight the virus, in addition to your existing sanitation processes that you're currently following. Also, the latest guidance from ASHRAE has mentioned ionization in the air handlers as an alternate to UV light. And that's a huge benefit. And with UV light, as Ron already pointed out, it can kill what it shines on. You have to be exposed to the UV light in order for it to have any impact whatsoever. With ionization technology, the positive and the negative ions that are generated from this technology, it actually travels with the airflow. It would be like standing at your return air grill with a cigarette and letting all that smoke flow into the system. And that smoke is representing the ions. The ions get carried with the smoke, or as the smoke in this example, through that entire HVAC system and supplies out into the space. And that's what these ions are doing. They're coming out into the actual space where you can treat the space. And that's important because according to Philips, who manufactures a lot of these UV lights for all these different manufacturers around the country that just simply put their brand on the UV lamp and the ballast, they have stated on their website, which I provided a link here, that it takes 6 seconds of exposure time to kill 99% of COVID-19 or the SARS-CoV-2 virus at that particular dose, 5 microjoules per centimeter square. Now you can actually increase or decrease the amount of time it takes to do this work, but you have to add more lamps, high output lamps, and so you can shorten it. But when you think about their standard design, as Ron said, when you're putting UV lights in the system, you have to design for that. I have no doubt that UV light will kill COVID, mold, bacteria, virus, but you have to have enough contact time and exposure time for that to happen. So when you think about that, 6 seconds, and you put that into a moving airstream, if the airstream is moving at 500 feet per minute, which is generally what's inside of the air handler through the cooling coils, that requires 50 feet of ductwork in order to equate to 6 seconds of time. And so that's a lot of ductwork you have to coat to get that 6 seconds to be able to kill it effectively in what we would call the single pass. And so with ionization, when you're generating the ions, it's traveling with the airflow. So you have minutes of exposure time to the virus with this technology. So just be cautious when you're using UV lamps. If you just put a couple lamps in your system, especially if they're not high output, you're not going to be able to kill on the fly effectively. And that's why ASHRAE has generally recommended UV lamps mounted on the wet side of the cooling coil. Ron had a great picture there that showed how nasty and dirty those coils can get. Well, the UV light shining on them has an infinite amount of time, even if the dosage is low, in order to kill what is growing on that coil. So that's why they're effective on drain pans and on the leaving side of the coils. But you do have a maintenance item that has to be replaced. You also have to worry about what that light is shining on. It could degrade and break down plastics and anything organic like wiring, as an example. So with NeedlePoint BiPolar Ionization, this is simply an updated version of technology that's been around since the early 1900s. And so if you look at the technology and the history of bipolar ionization, it started off with a glass tube, or it was now it's a composite tube by many manufacturers that still make this older type of system. And we simply would apply a high voltage into the glass tube, and there's a mesh screen on the inside as well as on the outside, and the outside screen is grounded. And so in order for that electricity to go through the tube, it had to be a high enough power level to break down the dielectric, to break down the glass to complete the electrical circuit. When you would have enough power to make that actually happen, you would exceed the power level for oxygen to be ionized. When you ionize oxygen, you always generate ozone as a byproduct. So that's why these older technologies always generate ozone as a byproduct. That's just a function of how they operate along with the ionization. Plus, just like a UV light, you have a tube that wears out and must be replaced. Now, when you look at the newer technology, the NeedlePoint systems, the needle points can be stainless steel, they can be carbon fiber. A lot of manufacturers have moved on to carbon fiber because they're non-corrosive, they don't reduce in sharpness over time, and they don't wear out. You know, if you use a metal needle subjected to high voltage in enough time, it will oxidize. And I don't care if you use stainless steel, 316 stainless, medical grade metal, or titanium, it will eventually oxidize. The tips become less and less sharp, and the ions start to reduce and stop over time. And so that's why it's called NeedlePoint. We don't have the glass tubes. We have the sharp needles, which in this case is carbon fiber or stainless steel in most applications. There's no dielectric. So the voltage and the power can be controlled to lower than what oxygen is, which means you don't ionize the oxygen through this process. And so this technology has now been shown by UL to be an ozone-free technology, and that's important. Within UL, you have two standards that these electronic air cleaners are manufacturing to. 867 is the standard that means it's fused properly, it's safe, it's effective, it's not going to catch on fire. And there's a loophole within that original standard that stated if the products were duct mounted, which most of these products are mounted in the duct or on the duct, they don't have to be tested for ozone. So I caution you that if you're dealing with manufacturers, ask them for their UL 867 certification and their UL 2998 certification. The 2998 certification is the latest and greatest, which is now a requirement of ASHRAE. You can see here, ASHRAE 62, 2019, section 571 requires electronic air cleaners, including UV lights, polarized filters, and ionizers, to have this certification, which means you don't generate ozone. And this applies to both duct mounted equipment and portable room air cleaners. So like the Carfax report, I know everybody on here has probably heard that commercial about the Carfax, show me the Carfax. If you're dealing with other manufacturers and different brands, ask for their Carfax report, which is the ozone certification in our world. So these particles that are being generated are produced by people in the space, animals, walking around, activities, and there's over 18 million particles in 1 cubic foot of air in standard applications that don't have high infiltration systems or NeedlePoint ionization type systems. And these particles can be easily seen as the sun shines through brightly, which turns into a sunbeam. You'll notice that if you walk through the sunbeam, you don't see any movement because the particles are ultrafine. They're below 0.3 microns, but they're in such high quantities, you visually can see it as a ray of sun. And so when these positive negative ions are flowing out of your diffusers and into the system, it hits these particles, it makes them stick together. It's like raising the sail on a sailboat, and that starts making the particle larger. It gains more surface area. Just like the wind can push against the sail on a boat and get it moving, the airflow in your HVAC system can now push against the larger particle and get it back to your filter to get it captured. If you look at particles by size and quantity within a lot of spaces, you'll notice that the majority of the particles are actually of the smallest size in nature. Over 16 million can be at 0.3 microns and below. When you put these systems in, if you're actually measuring with a laser particle counter, which generally starts measuring at 0.3 microns and then goes up from there, at 0.3 microns, you may actually see an increase in particles when you first power on your ion generators, because we're taking the 0.1 and the 0.2 micron particles, we're making them larger, and they get to the point where the meter can now start detecting even the smallest particle as a 0.3 micron particle. Then given enough time, they start coming down again. So I just want to point that out for those of you that may do your own test and balancing and verification. You may see a spike, but don't worry, it will come back down again. We're just getting rid of that sunbeam with this technology. The other reason why particle agglomeration is beneficial is that it helps make your body more efficient. COVID-19 is approximately 0.1 microns in diameter, so that can get deepest into your lungs. And so by making that particle stick to another larger particle and getting it out of the air through the filter system, or if your body actually still sees it, number one, it should be inactivated if it comes in contact with these ions in the space, but also at the same time, it's making them larger so your body is more efficient in your nasal cavity and your upper respiratory tract. It can stop these larger particles much more effectively. So when you think about the sunbeam, that could be pet dander, pollen, mold spores, bacteria, virus. You get that garbage out of the air, it's going to have a positive impact on health. Now, while most manufacturers will not make health claims, nor would my company, it only makes sense that if you get that garbage out of the air, it's less stuff there to trigger allergies and asthma and all of these detrimental health effects. Another benefit to ionizing the air in the space can be seen through this independent study by the University of Cincinnati in 2005. By ionizing the air in the space through mounting this in your ductwork or in the air handling systems, it makes even face masks more efficient because the particles are getting larger, and it makes the material in the mask more efficient to stop the larger particles. So an N95 respirator is over 48% more efficient, and the lower efficiency filter, which is the dust respirator, is over 3,000% more efficient. So what this tells us is that the lower the efficiency of the material, the more impact the ionization will have in the space. So for those people that are wearing their own bandanas across their face or t-shirts or whatever they've made at home, it's only going to enhance those effects. Also, another independent article shows that ionizing the air in the ductwork is better than putting HEPA filters in your duct or even using portable room air cleaners if the space is larger than approximately 10 feet by 10 feet in width and length, and then about 9 feet in height. That's approximately 25 cubic meters. So if you're dealing with a larger space than a really small office, ionizing the air in the entire system removes those ultrafine particles better than what you're going to get by using these portable air cleaners. So particle control is the first benefit. The second is odor control. Again, that's the second O in Pope. And so the way we control odors with this technology is that you impart 12 electron volts of energy into the airstream, and every gas molecule in the air has an electron volt number associated to it, which simply means how much energy does it take to hold these molecules together. When you put more energy into the air and you exceed that number, you rip it apart. So formaldehyde, which is a known carcinogen, that splits apart into carbon dioxide and water vapor. Ammonia, which is NH3, that rips apart into oxygen, nitrogen, and water vapor. So based on what you start with, determines how it reacts and what it breaks down to. You'll notice that oxygen is down here at 12.07. That's important, and that's the secret sauce to not producing ozone. You don't want to ionize oxygen, which these older systems have to make that dielectric break down, and that's why they always generate ozone at some level. Even if the voltage is turned down just to the point where it's conducting, it's still making corona discharge and ozone because of that. The third benefit is pathogen control. Based on the time of exposure and the ion concentration, you get a resultant kill rate or inactivation rate. Here you can see a list of various contaminants, E. coli, norovirus, and then COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2. You see that in 30 minutes at 99.95% reduction rate, that is what you're going to achieve at a level of 27,000 ions per cubic centimeter. Now this testing was specific to aviation. They were looking at, here's the ion counts that are able to be achieved when mounted in aviation applications like in a 777 or a 747, and that's how fast you can expect the reduction there. Now in just 5 minutes, you're going to see about a 2 log reduction, which is giving you 99% reduction even in 5 minutes time. So it's a very big impact on SARS-CoV-2. And the other thing that's coming out in research is that this virus has a net positive charge on its surface membrane. And as you probably are aware, opposites attract. So the negative ions that are being generated are electrostatically charged and drawn to the positive charges on these virus membranes. So that's also helping to target and seek these things out in the air in that space. And here's an example of looking at 1,500 ions per cubic centimeter compared to 27,000. Now, a lot of larger commercial spaces were able to achieve higher than 1,500, but at worst case, that's the minimum that we would want to design to. And at 1,500 ions per cc, your inactivation rate achieves close to 90% in 60 minutes. But if you have 27,000, it just changes the slope of the curve. You just get to where you want to be faster. At 15 minutes, you're now approaching that 99% mark, and then it just goes on out to even a higher rate with more time. So just like a UV light, it's time and intensity. The same is true for ionization. It's time and the ion density. Within the COVID-19 testing, if you get the report for this, there was 3 test sites. There was 3 different furniture configurations to represent a actual airplane, to represent a small office space, and then another configuration of a small office space as well. At each site, there were 3 materials: aluminum, plastic, and leather. And on all of those surfaces, the ions were able to get to it and get in and around this furniture and reduce it. So even though this was a shipping container size volume of space, 20 feet long, 8 feet wide, and 8 feet tall, the ionization was able to impact this on those surfaces in this particular test, which I thought was very beneficial to see. And when you take into account the actual control, for those of you that don't understand what controls are, the control means how fast does the virus die without being subjected to UV light or ionization in this case. And so without doing anything to the virus, eventually it will die. And I know you've seen that in the news where they said on cardboard it can last X number of minutes or hours, stainless steel. Well, each surface allows it to live a certain amount of time. So by not ionizing the air, this is how fast it died on plastic, which is Kydex, and on aluminum, this is how fast it's dying on aluminum. And so when you energize the ionization in the same chamber, in 5 minutes, you can see it goes from about 2.7 down to a little less than 1 log. So you have a 2 log reduction in less than 5 minutes, which is very beneficial. And then from 5 minutes on, it continues just to trend that downward to where you get a very high kill rate in that space, which was over 99.94% reduction in these surfaces. So as you saw with the UV light, it can take a cooling coil and clean it up. Well, ionization can do the same thing. We can take an old cooling coil and it can make an old cooling coil restored. It'll restore the heat transfer. So now the heat can transfer through the coil efficiently back into the chiller or the DX system. And it'll also save you fan energy, because now as the biofilm goes away, you start opening up the passageways for the air to move through the coil, which lowers the pressure drop and also saves you fan energy. So you get savings at the chiller as well as savings in the fan. Now, this is just a time-lapse experiment that could represent your cooling coil. On the left-hand side, that's your coil without ionization or UVC. And on the right-hand side, this is your coil with ionization. And it shows over a period of 7 to 8 days, using time-lapse photos in about 20 seconds, you can see the mold start growing on the left-hand side. So in the presence of ionization, mold cannot grow, nor can virus and bacteria. And so while you can request from your different manufacturers that make this technology literally hundreds of thousands of dollars in test data, sometimes a little $20 experiment for Walmart is more impactful, especially in a video like this, than looking at all this test data, which can just make your eyes roll back. So depending on the manufacturer, there's different types of products out there, different sizes, different configurations, different options. Here's just an example of a few of these. Some will have auto cleaning wiper blades. So every 3 days, the brush turns, or the wiper blade turns on, it cleans the brushes off. So there's truly no maintenance with some of these systems and brands, and there's no replacement parts. That's the beautiful thing about carbon fiber brushes, is that they're very flexible and they don't wear out. Even with over 8 million cycles, testing has shown that the brushes aren't going to wear out. Your motor is likely going to fail before the brushes, which is what's been seen in a lot of the life cycle testing. The other thing to point out is that some manufacturers will have what's called universal voltage, 24 volts to 240, AC or DC. You simply bring voltage to the unit, it senses what you've connected with the microprocessor inside, and it regulates to that. That's actually a very important feature, because if you look back and you think about the chart that I showed you and how you prevent ozone, you don't put more energy into the airstream to ionize oxygen. So in order to do that, it shouldn't matter if you hit this unit with 24 volts or 240, the output should not change to those brushes. So therefore you always stay below oxygen and you stay safe and effective with no ozone. Auto cleaning is also beneficial, because it doesn't matter if you happen to put it in and there's no filter in the system, somebody forgot to put the filter in. Here you can see drywall dust everywhere. A client sent me this photo. And I'll point out that the actual carbon fiber brushes are still nice and clean. So the ions were still being emitted, no reduction over time, but had that not had that auto cleaning cycle, it would be as white as the unit itself. There's also other options for duct mounting units. You could drill a 4-inch round hole. Sometimes it's a rectangular hole, again, depending on the manufacturer. You just drop that in and you can treat individual zones. So maybe you have clients that have a 50,000 CFM air handler, but they're leasing office space that gets 2,000 CFM of that airflow. So they can just treat their own office with the ionization versus treating everybody in the building that may not want the technology. There's also ionization bars for larger air handling systems. These bars are assembled in 6-inch sections, so they'll fit any size cooling coil that you have out there. Here you can see how the bars mount across the width of the cooling coil. They do not obstruct the airflow, so it's great for retrofit applications. You don't have to worry about reshiving the fans or changing the VFD settings, and they're not going to take up much space, regardless if it's mounted like this with sheet metal screws, or if you use rare earth magnets. That'll allow you to just snap it right to your coil casing, assuming you don't have stainless steel or aluminum. And here's another example in a package rooftop unit. There's one filter that's been removed, and you can see how the bars can fit between the filters and the coils. Again, you want to make sure you're after the filters. If you happen to mount this in that mixed air compartment and the ions hit that filter, the filter will stop the ions. You'll have no benefit of coil cleaning downstream. So with this technology, NeedlePoint ionization, there is no visible light and there's no ozone, so there's no odor. So in order to measure and verify, you can use the integral alarm contacts that most people include in their products. You could also use a handheld air ion counter. You could use a permanent solution like a wall thermostat that measures the ions, or a duct mounted device to do the same thing. And both of those devices will send a 0 to 10 volt signal back to the building automation system to tell you that it's on and operating. Now, before COVID, I can tell you that most people did not care what their ion levels were. They only cared about the benefits, which can be seen through particle reduction and VOC odor reduction, or bacteria sampling if you have EMSL type kits to do that. And so there's multiple ways to measure and verify the systems, both ion counts as well as the actual sensors to measure the benefits like the particle reductions and odor reductions. So with this technology, first cost is generally what your life cycle cost is going to be, minus a few watts of power it takes to power these devices. Most of these products, self-cleaning or not, are only 2 watts to operate. The larger systems that could treat up to 60,000 CFM of airflow with the bars, that's only 15 watts of power. So very little power to run these systems. No replacement parts like all these other technologies, no maintenance with the systems. They're designed to last over 10 years of life, even greater, unless a lightning strike of some sort takes it out. Universal voltage is available by many manufacturers. And then you can install these in any type of HVAC system, whether it's a ductless mini split, a wall hung, VRF, VRV system, it fits everything. And then the benefits, remember that acronym POPE, particles, odors, pathogens, and energy. That's what's being impacted with this technology. The technology does treat the space. There is no ozone. Make sure that whoever you're using, you have that Carfax report, the UL 2998 no ozone certification. And because of no ozone, you're not creating these other harmful byproducts with the technology. So with that, we've got some contact details here. If you're interested in global plasma technology, we've got commercial reps shown on the right side based on your state you're located. And on the left-hand side, I'll hand it back to Ron and Michael for their contact data.